In this unit, I'd like to take a look together with you at the front-end search in Shopware 6 and the configuration options behind it. First, we can go to the settings and then to the search. And here we now find two tabs with plenty of settings that we can adjust. First of all, it's important to note that there are two different search logics. That means we can either use an in search or an or search. What does that mean exactly? For example, if we look at the in search, let's say we enter jeans summer as the search term. Then, in the respective field being searched, like the product name, both jeans and summer would have to be included. Otherwise, the whole thing wouldn't work. The same applies, or would also apply to our example in our guitar shop. For instance, if we have an acoustic guitar and we enter both terms, so both acoustic and guitar, in the search, then only guitars that actually contain both of those terms would be found. Next, there's the or search. With this one, the or logic would always be applied. So, for our acoustic guitar, that would mean that either the word acoustic has to be present in the respective field or the word guitar, which would also allow, for example, electric guitars to be found, and so on. Exactly. We generally recommend that if you have a very large product portfolio, you should use the in logic, since it is much more specific, especially when the products are similar. For example, if you have a guitar shop like here, then guitars are usually very similar and differ more in their specifications. That means the customer is more likely to enter something like electric guitar. If you have only a few products, we would recommend using the or search here, so that something from your products is always found that roughly matches what was entered. Next, we have the minimum length of the search term. Here, a 2 has been entered. This means that there must be at least 2 characters in the search before a result is even considered. Right. So, for example, with just one letter, it usually wouldn't make sense, because that letter is probably present in a lot of terms or fields. Exactly. You always have to keep an eye on that, and you can really play around with it to significantly influence the search. Next, you can determine which content should actually be searched. Right. That means we have the option, and you can see it quite nicely here, to select the individual fields and make them searchable. Or we can change the ranking score itself. What does that mean exactly? For example, we have the category name here, and in my shop, it's actually not searchable at all. That means I would have to edit it now and could say, okay, I want it to be searchable and assign it a certain ranking score. The score itself isn't relevant for now. I'll explain that in a moment. And what this would do is ensure that, for example, if a customer enters the category name guitars, they would give results for their search. However, in this case, I used a relatively low ranking score of 100. If you compare that to other things, like the product number, which is much higher than, well, this one is a bit less important in terms of priority. So, whenever something is entered, a kind of calculation takes place where different points are assigned. And the more ranking score I assign to something, for example to the product number, which is usually very clear, right? So if a customer enters a number, they usually already know exactly what they're looking for. And then you can say, sure, you can give 1,000 points for that if it's a match, and display those results first. Of course, if you have a logic where your categories are especially important, then you could just set the ranking score here to 2,000, and that would make it twice as important as the product numbers. I think you get what I'm trying to say. This applies to some other fields as well, like the manufacturer name and so on. You can really search to a ton of fields, and you can also add custom fields, meaning your own fields. Basically, for all of this to work, you have to make sure these fields are properly maintained. So, you should always make sure, and we also recommend this, to choose a good product name, ideally with lots of information, a nice product description, and a manufacturer, and also include information about the manufacturer, and so on. This will definitely help you in search, so that your customer can actually find the products they want. Next, at the very bottom, there's a table where you can exclude certain search terms. We've already added a few default words here. But you can also add your own words, like here, for example, me, myself, and so on. You could exclude all of them, Or, well, this would simply make sure that these terms are no longer searched for. For example, in this context, it wouldn't make sense for most products. That's why the default words usually work pretty well here. Okay, let's take a look at the Live Search tab at the top. Here, we can first rebuild the search index. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And we can also perform a live search. That means, for example, if I've ranked the search terms in my General tab, I can check right here if it matches directly. I could just select a sales channel, for example, this user trainings 1, and then enter my term to see if it returns any results. And here we can see right away, for example, okay, we have Guitar 1, Guitar 2, and so on, each with its respective ranking score behind it. And here, for example, we have the American Ultra Stratocaster. It only has a ranking score of 80, probably because the word guitar only appears in the description, and the description is ranked lower. You see, this way you can figure things out pretty well and even tweak the ranking yourself. Once you're happy with the settings, you save them up here. Then you'll get a confirmation that it worked. And now there's one more really important thing, so I'll go back into the settings and then to System. Because here we find a menu item called Caches and Indexes. We definitely need to click on that. Because in order for our search to actually be up to date, it's necessary that the index, where everything is more or less prepared and assigned, is current. And we can do that here by simply clicking on Update Indexes. We also have the option here to make the selection a bit more specific. So whether we want to update all of them, or if we only want to update a selected index. And here we can also specify which one. In most cases, it generally makes sense to just update all of them. But you can also specifically select the search index, or the product index, and so on, and just index that one individually. Exactly. Once you've done that, you can click on it, and you'll see here that it's rebuilding everything. You'll get a notification once it's finished, and you can also see it again in the settings or in the notifications at the top right? So, as we just saw here, everything reloaded briefly, and then it was done and ready to use in the front end with the settings. And that's pretty much it for the search.